can just. Last time, General, we left at a very interesting point when you mentioned there you should never take any shortcuts.
That's right. Go the distance.
You go the distance.
Throughout your life. Just as a sequel to that, Muhammad Mumtaz was a section commander, that he had 2 stripes in my time.
Okay.
He had the top man in the school called the cadet captain. He had 3 stripes. He had a separate room to himself. Now, each section, as I told you, there was, in my time, 3 sections. Rawlinsons, Roberts, and Kitchener's. These are all named after British commanders-in-chief.
Okay, yes.
And then, when the war got on a bit, then they had a new section called Wavell. Wavell was the Viceroy of India, Field Marshal Lord Wavell. And British boys were sent to the school also.
Okay.
So they had a separate section where the British boys were there. Now, the section commander was responsible for the discipline and conduct of all the boys in his section.
Okay.
Like we had a prefect at a school, right? But he had a lot of powers of punishment.
Oh.
Punishment in the RIMC was if you did anything which your senior cadets not like or did not appreciate,
Okay.
you were punished.
Oh, okay.
By the cadets.
So
by the
it
senior
was their own charter.
Punishments were always physical.
Oh my God. Okay.
Series of front rolls, back rolls, bed stretches on the ground, doubling around all over the place. In other words, all punishment was based on physical capability and trained you also to develop a strong body.
Right.
Right? So now, Mumtaz, very first day, he gave us this advice and made us do 5 rounds of this dawn. Now, I must tell you, because I keep getting flashbacks. Later in life, when I was the army chief, just a few months prior to my retirement, 1990, I was the chief guest at the RIMC for the passing out parade and things, and the Founders' Day, 13th of March every year. Large number of cadets, old cadets come there. And some of the senior boys, much senior to me, there was a Major Virendra Singh, for instance, who was the owner of Modern School in Delhi, which had been raised by his father. And a very good friend of his called Bikram Singh, who never joined the military, but he was in RIMC. And he joined the Statesman and became one of the production editors of the Statesman. Okay. He and a few others had invited some old boys of Pakistan. Because, independence was in 47.
Right.
Now I'm talking 1990.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we had a series of wars with Pakistan. So he called, with the permission of government of us, 7 or 8 old boys in 1990 March, when the Founders' Day was taking place on the 13th. I was the chief guest. And I went there and I took the cadets Guard of Honor. And as I came, we have a memorial ceremony where, all the martyrs who fell during various conflicts, including my elder brother Somnath, who was the first Paramveer Chakra. There's a memorial there, which we all go and pay respects to. So on the way, large number of cadets get together and old boys who have been invited who came there. So as I walked there, this Mr. Bikram Singh, whom I knew very well, he said, General, my wife and I were coming. And he said, General, just hang on, there are some Pakistani old boys who want to meet you. So the senior most amongst them, Bikram introduced him as Muhammad Mumtaz, Major General Muhammad Mumtaz, retired. So he shook my hand. Said, General Sharma, my heartiest congratulations for a Rimcolian to become the Army Chief of India. Good for India and good for Pakistan.
Oh.
These were his words.
Hmm.
So I said, Mumtaz, tum mujhe bhool gaye?
Yeah.
And I said in Urdu to him, on my very first day at the age of 11,
Hmm.
you were the section commander.
Hmm.
And Hari Bhagat and I and Darjeet Aluwalia were 11-year-olds. Mumtaz must have been about 15 or 16 at that time. He was ready to pass out.
Hmm.
So you grabbed us and made us do 5 rounds of that lawn
Hmm.
because we crossed the lawn. And you said,
Yeah.
never cut corners, go the distance
Hmm.
throughout your life.
Hmm.
I said, I did that. That's why I became the army chief. And you know, he was so taken aback with this.
Hmm.
Tears
Hmm.
came down from his eyes. And his Begum was there. She sort of, you know, took his arm to
Hmm.
steady him.
Hmm.
He was old. He was quite old, retired. So he said, General Sharma, thank you very much for your compliments. If they were more like you, in both India and Pakistan, there would be no conflict.
Oh.
So I invited him to my house,
Okay.
the army house in Radhaji Marg in Delhi, near the central government's offices.
Wow.
I said, you're here, you're going back on the 13th, you'll be, when are you going back to Pakistan? He said, I'll be going 15th morning, like the PIA flight. I said, then you and Begum Sahiba, come and have a drink with me in 4 Radhaji Marg on the 14th evening. So then he mulled over this, and I was talking to somebody else. He said, General sir, one moment. I said, yes. He said, I'm an alien. I am from a Dushman country.
Hmm.
Why are you inviting me to your house?
Yeah.
Your intelligence
Hmm.
will get after you
Hmm.
for cohabiting with aliens.
Yeah. I can't even imagine what kind of permissions would require for a general to invite.
So I said, Mumtaz, this is not Pakistan, this is India.
Okay. Hmm.
Our intelligence people are not ISI of Pakistan who pakdo all the time. Not only pakdo citizens, but also the military.
True.
Of anyone who acts out of line. And there's a very khufiya business, you know.
Yeah.
Very lot of secrecy about this. I said, we're an open society. We're a democracy. And all the intelligence people are my friends.
Hmm.
So I tell them what to do and they tell me what to do. There's no big deal. You come to my house. You don't worry about anything.
Hmm.
If you have any reluctance, I'll send a few men and officers to grab you and your wife and bring you by force, if necessary. He came and spent a whole hour with me. We had a lot of interesting discussions of. Now, why do I tell you this?
Hmm.
None of our politicians, including my Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi at that time, could understand how the Indian Army, especially people who were from RIMC and from military schools, and from certain other schools like HSN College in Lahore, the Chiefs College. Many boys went from Chiefs College because partition took place. Many boys from there went to Doon School or to other.
Right.
There's this similar college in Jaipur, right?
Mayo College.
Mayo is also on the same basis as the
Correct.
the Chiefs College in Lahore.
Right.
So they also have visited Pakistan and all that, made friends.
Hmm.
So, but they are civilians mostly.
Right.
Military, Rajiv Gandhi, for instance, asked me, how is it that if you have so good relations, the other side, how do you fight? I said, why? Wars are created by politicians, not by military. We are only obedient soldiers for the protection of the nation. So you in India don't take our advice. Though we insist on trying to give it to you, we will still only follow legal rules from you, not illegal rules. You see, we are very highly educated and very highly trained. More so than many politicians and many bureaucrats, I must assure you.
Of course.
So therefore, it's not, you have to have high quality human beings controlling a military force because they're armed to the teeth.
Right.
And they can use their weapons and their power to do anything they like.
Mm.
So you have to have very highly educated officers in the military to understand the basic structure of democracy and the obedience to the state, obedience to the elected representatives of the people.
Right.
See,
Yeah.
provided obedience is to orders which are legal.
Mm.
You understand this point? There are many politicians who give you illegal orders,
Yeah.
which you don't have to obey, because you have to have the brains to understand what is legal and what is illegal. More about that later when we come to various stories when I was a chief. So he asked me, he says, such good friends who've been in college together, how do you fight with each other? He says, he's fighting for his country, doing his duty.
Right.
We're fighting for our country, doing our duty. The fault is yours.
Mm.
For not using diplomacy and politics for peace.
Mm.
When you come to conflict, if you see the situation in Europe today,
Yes.
the way Russia and Europe are in conflict,
Yeah.
they're like kindergarten boys, having a scrap in the kindergarten and the school for no rhyme or reason.
Mm.
Somebody's feeling afraid of something, the other child is feeling afraid of something different. It is fair on one hand, and politics on the other, where, for instance, the next term for the US president much depends on how tough and bold he is.
Right.
You have to show that. Same with many leaders. Boris Johnson, for instance, is under threat because of some party he had during the COVID lockdowns.
Yes.
He has to show how tough he is.
Yes.
Good for the nation. He
Yes.
has to show there's a conflict going on, and all of us have to get together to face the enemy.
Mm.
And, you know, it's very essential to have an enemy. You have to face somebody so
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
get the country together to think of that rather than
Absolutely. Yeah. Half the time it is distraction. I mean, they are
Yeah.
using tactics of distraction.
So the principle here I'm trying to indicate, which is a lesson for all of us, that if two militaries are friendly, there's a very little chance of war because they advise the respective politicians
Right.
accordingly. That's the reason why friendship between international militaries is very essential. No, mark you, chiefs from various countries are allowed to visit other countries, but only friendly countries,
Okay.
based on the government's conception of who is friendly and who is not friendly. Somebody may be friendly today and unfriendly tomorrow, you know
Right.
how it is.
Right. Right.
But all political rulers in the world need conflict internally and externally to get their votes and stay in power. So military still have to fight in case orders are given to fight and their advice is not taken. Or diplomacy fails. You know, when diplomacy fails, then the military comes in.
Yeah. Right.
As Clausewitz, the great German philosopher on war, he wrote a book called On War, 18th century. He says that the military is only another arm of politics. It's Chanakya has said the same thing, that when reasoning and diplomacy fails, then you use the danda. Before you use the danda, you should try and have talks to not use it.
Right. Right.
Because even after the conflict is over, you still have to have talks to create peace.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's one more point I'd like to convey here.
Yeah.
Nobody is victorious or defeated in war. If you ask me, both sides get defeated.
True.
Both sides, the economy fails, as you saw in World War II. Both sides have huge losses. All right. One side may be victorious on the battlefield, but the enemy is not defeated till he's mentally defeated. Unless you accept defeat in your mind, even as a common human being or in the civil world, you're not defeated.
Right.
In other words, to change your mind, there has to be something more than just violence, right? There has to be friendship, there has to be talks, there have to be,
Exchange, yeah.
and
Discussions,
there has
yeah.
to be reasoning. You have to use your brain,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah. The best and the brightest should go to military. No, in that.
No. Point is, it's not that all military officers think the same way. But I just say to you, having reached a very high position in command, all military forces experience battle from a lower rank to an upper rank.
Right.
That bravery and courage is on both sides. High quality and conduct is present on both sides of a conflict. It's the politics which creates the conflict. But reasoning and diplomacy and goodwill can create peace, right? So now, I just want to give this point to you to show you how some of the militaries think. I don't say that all militaries think this way. Earlier in one of my talks to you, I had also said that our soldiers are trained not to be nasty
Right.
to prisoners, to enemy,
Right.
civilians, ladies, and all that.
Mm.
And with the result that honor and high conduct of character is necessary to the man who has got the weapons and the strength to create violence. See? This is how we try and train the military. I don't say that all of us are like that, but this is our attempt. And we don't want to hate the enemy. The Chinese are on our border, we don't want to hate. You see? Because they are doing their duty to their leadership. So all right, we see where all that goes. Now coming back to RIMC. What I noticed in RIMC, I mean, there's a very, very hard physical and mental trauma to the young man who joins. Physically, you have to do physical training morning and evening. You have to play games every day, large number of fields. Of course, in RIMC, they were all Indian boys from all castes and creed.
Okay.
In the British days, it was more the rich people who had done well in life, either from corporate sector or the Maharajas in the various states of India, who the British Crown thought were loyal to the British Crown. The idea of making RIMC the idea came up in 1919, as a matter of fact, and the school was opened in 1922 by the then Prince of Wales, Edward,
Okay.
who later became King Edward VIII for 1 year. He fell in love with Mrs. Simpson, if you recollect your history.
Yes.
And the then Parliament refused to accept that the king can marry firstly a foreigner who's not a royalty, and secondly that she had already been divorced twice and had a few children. Not acceptable. It's acceptable today. It wasn't acceptable then. Otherwise, how would Charles be the next king? Right? I mean, his wife Diana died an unnatural death and was divorced, and also the lady he's married was already married to somebody else. So now, life changes and the views change, and therefore, Edward VIII would have been a very good king because he was trained to be a king. And he was a very fine, upstanding man as far as we can know from our school, because he came and opened the school. He said something there, which I'll just explain to you. One of the things he said when he opened the school in 1922 was that it is the first few blows on the human weapon which gives it the strength and temper to face life's battles. These are the words he said in his opening speech, which we all learn. What does this mean? The simile is with the way you make steel out of iron. You know, iron is a metal which is brittle and can break, it's not very strong. What you do is you boil it till it becomes liquid. Then you add certain things like nickel, etc. You being a chemical expert would know more about it than I do. But you put chemicals, other material inside it, like nickel, for instance, and then you shape it by bashing it into whatever shape you like, when it's a semi-liquid state. So the first few blows on the human weapon will give it the strength and temper, which is like the temper of steel. It doesn't break, it's not brittle. See? To face life's battles. Now the soldier faces life's battles. But I must assure you that you also face life's battles. Civilians also face life's battles. You have problems in the family, problems with children, problems in your job, problems with your friends and enemies, right? These are life's battles. Now the saying, of course, is that the life's battles have to be faced and you have to overcome. And once you've done that, you get the strength of character to lead an equitable and happy life. Same thing with soldiers. See, now going on with RIMC is that firstly, there is a very hard physical and mental pressure on the young boys.
They're very young. It's just, you said 11-year-olds and 15-year-olds and so.
No, these are 11-year-olds.
Yeah, 11.
They are passing out at 15 and 16. You say, no.
Yeah, 11 to 15 is like very,
So
very
now,
young age.
Matthew, when they go to the National Defense Academy or to the Indian Military Academy or the military commissioning institutions of the Air Force and Navy, a similar thing happens. When you join, you're really bashed. What is the principle behind this? When a person comes from a civilian home as the beloved son of a family with lots of love and affection and of course advice and maybe some disciplining, there is a lot of ego in the human being. Even as a child, he wants to do what he wants to do. He thinks the way he thinks. In the military, that's not acceptable. So therefore, the first bashing, as one calls it, by senior cadets mostly, not by masters, is that you break the person's ego.
Okay.
In other words, you make it a malleable metal, like you boil steam till it's almost liquid, steel, iron, till you make it into a strong steel. So then discipline and conduct and character has to be instilled in the child so that he respects orders. He has a brain to think about it, but in the battlefield, you cannot question the orders of a senior person, even if you disagree. The saying is, you can say your view, but if the senior still gives the order, you have to do it. Otherwise, you don't get success in the battlefield. So that's the training of a soldier, and it's a very good training for building character and conduct. I give you another flash on this. When I was a major general on the staff in Army headquarters of the Army Chief was Krishna Rao, who belongs to Andhra, who had also become governor of Manipur and Nagaland and Tripura in his time, and he was also governor twice of J&K before he retired. Very fine officer. He once went to the Prime Minister Indira Gandhi to say that, instead of getting a superior quality of young men to join as officer corps of the army, we're getting a very low quality of human being because the pays and perks are not enough. We were poorly paid. It's much better now, but if you're poorly paid. And therefore, the young man who wants to get into life after having an education prefers to join the civil services or the corporate sector or some business institution because he gets much more money. He is much more comfortable life.
Right.
Why should he put himself out to physical stress and strain and mental stress and strain when he can get a more cushy job, as it's called, and get more money? So he told her, I want to raise the salaries of Jawans and officers when they join the army. So what about it? She said, but General, why do you want to do that? It's a very large army, and if I increase the salaries, our budgets will go for a section. So he says, because when these people join the military, as they become senior, they're in charge of armed men. You have to have high education and high quality to appreciate the basic requirements of a democratic conduct, of a conduct of respect for the other human being, which doesn't happen if you're not well educated, right? So when we used to get very superior boys earlier under the British, because the British controlled India through the military.
Right.
So with that, the top people always went to the military or to the civil services.
Right.
And the riffraff was allowed to go to there was no corporate sector, in fact. All the stuff was coming from abroad and we had to pay for it, as you know. That's how the British Raj bled India white with its resources to create the goods from abroad and sell it to us. All right. So she said, as a matter of fact, I'm not going to do this.
Okay.
Because we have such idiots in our country, uneducated masses, who don't even have a job, many of them. Very few of them get into jobs. And you at least in the military take them on, Jawans and officers, who are of a low quality. And by the time you've trained them in the military for about 5-10 years, they become very good citizens of India. They gain character and conduct which many civilians don't have.
Right.
Thanks to your training. So I want the pay to be kept low so that many of the poor people can't get a job anywhere. They come to the military and they get bashed instead.
Yes. Yes.
Become good citizens. In fact, it says every citizen of India should be trained in the army for a few years and then go out and settle life. See? Of course, we can't do that because the population is too large. It's a billion plus population. Army is only 1 million. Right. So that is where it stood. But that's her view. And that's an interesting point of view. Coming back to RIMC, we noticed that besides the physical stress and strain, there was a lot of loyalty amongst the cadets.
Okay.
And a lot of competition in games and boxing and swimming and whatever it is. A lot of physical competition and in classroom work. And there was a very good camaraderie, shall I say. And there were Muslims, there were Hindus, there were Sikhs, there were Jains, there were Christians. The British, by the way, tried quite a lot to their usual divide and rule. This meant that you have to accentuate the religious differences and caste differences amongst the cadets.
Right.
See? So we had what is known as a religious parade every evening.
Oh, really?
Yes, so Catholic schools and Protestant schools also, you have a church in the morning, you have a church in the evening.
Right.
That's their style. But here also they insisted, no, that's not our style. So in the school premises in RIMC, there was a mandir, there was a masjid, there was a gurdwara. And in the cantonment, there was a church. So Christians used to go to the church every evening, or once a week at least. Every evening, a religious parade was fallen in and marched off to your respective places of worship. So the Hindus went to the temple and the Muslims went to the masjid and the Sikhs went to the Gurdwara. And we had a Granthi and we had a Mullah and we had a Pandit. The Mullah used to teach Urdu, the Pandit used to teach Hindi. And the Granthi used to generally assist because nobody was learning Punjabi. Now, what was the reaction of the cadets during the drill parade? We took it as a normal parade. You get a physical training parade, you get a drill parade, all right, you get a religious parade. And though we went to different places, we used to also joke amongst ourselves as to what did you learn then, what did the chap say, and what did this chap say, and argue amongst ourselves that, you know, he's a bloody idiot. For instance, the Muslim cadets told us that you chaps don't know, our mandir is far superior. I mean, our masjid is far superior to your Gurdwara and your mandir. He said, why? He said, because we've got 4 guava trees there. The guavas are in bloom. So, with the help of our Muslim friends, we would raid the masjid after dark, you know, to grab all the guavas and eat them. With the result, the Mullah was very upset that he reported to the principal of the school, and a lot of inquiries were made as to what this happened, but nobody would admit. Because there were all types of cadets who went there as a body and finished off the war. So such friendship between the religions and castes. Secondly, I must tell you that during our independence movement for so many, almost 100 years we've been at it, the Muslims and Hindus and Sikhs were all together to fight for this independence. Now, because of the partition is another, why did the partition take place? To come to think of it, is that you have to create religious differences here. Idea here being that the Western world must still control the resources of this country. So we must fight amongst each other. Now the Western powers have, there was a war in Korea, they partitioned that in two bits, and so they still at war. Vietnam was partitioned, and that war lasted for 10, 15 years. Till the Viet Cong, which are communists, managed to conquer the whole country and created the present day's Vietnam. So India and Pakistan, these boundaries are really false boundaries. And many of us belong to the areas which are now in Pakistan and have lived there all our lives. More of that later when I talk about the wars and what we should go on. All right. So here in RIMC, there were no religious differences despite the effort of separately going to military parades to each religious place.
So what was the glue then? How all the efforts are made? These are very young children. How did they not succeed?
The young children are interesting human beings,
Yeah.
You must have
Yes.
got some children.
Yes.
You don't necessarily listen to what you're telling them.
That's true.
And when they have friends and themselves among school, they discuss everything. My dad said this, your dad said that, but they're friends. So I think that is what we are living in the dormitories together. You see? And we are very good friends. If a senior cadet comes to catch you, we are helping each other so that the chap doesn't catch you out on something. If the master is after your blood because he said something, you help. Anyway. Now, the second thing, at least I noticed that, in Sherwood College, I found that my brain and memory was very good. I could remember everything. I mean, I'm talking to you now. I am remembering so many things of my childhood.
Yeah.
Vivid.
Yeah.
Vivid memory. Now that's a God-given gift. Some people have it, others don't. But I noticed in my family, my father had it, my sisters have it, my elder brother has it.
Yes.
Maybe it's a gene which comes down in the family or whatever it is. I also feel that when you travel abroad, you must have traveled abroad. You find that people who come from India are much sharper in the head
That's true.
than people abroad. They are like cattle and sheep. Whatever the leaders tell them, they agree. We are questioning our leaders all the time. So really speaking, we are a true democracy in India, aren't we? We argue about everything.
Yeah.
Many times you notice you're talking to somebody and before the person has completed the sentence, you know what he's talking about. And you're already butting in to carry on with the next one. It doesn't happen abroad. See? So what do we say? This land of India has got something spiritual in it, which has created citizenry here, no matter which religious or caste persuasion, which is very sharp. You go to the Jogis also, you go to the poorest of the poor, they're very sharp. The children are very sharp. You notice in Rashmi's Vidya, for instance, people come from lowest forms of society, economically weak, yogis. They're sharp in the head.
Yes. Mensa qualifiers.
Yes. So there's an interesting factor in our country.
Right.
It's not necessarily so in so many other countries. All right. Let's see where that takes us. But it's a tremendous value for this country to have citizens like this. Now, coming back to RIMC, I noticed in class that I was always coming first in every subject. That's English, physics, and mathematics. We didn't have any chemistry, unfortunately, because they didn't have a chemistry master. But the teachers were all British, lifelong teachers. Their sole job in life was to teach. And they were dedicated teachers. Secondly, the teacher-student which would be of interest to you also and to any school. Because of the large population and the lack of trained teachers, we have large number of students in a class.
Right.
Government says, except in central schools, 45 boys or girls in a class for a teacher. In the British system of education, especially the military system, which I noticed across the board in all our military institutions, there are never more than 8 or 10
Oh,
persons
that's
in a class.
amazing ratio.
Yes.
Yeah.
So in RIMC, when I went there were not very many boys. My time there were hardly 120 boys there. Now it's 250. But the class teacher had only 10 boys in the class, or 10 or 12 boys in the class. So with the result, the teacher knew every person in great detail, you see, and could assist that boy to develop in a better way. That's mentally developed and physically.
Right.
And our masters were all experts in games. Used to play cricket with us, used to play football with us, used to do swimming with us, you see. Used to join us for hockey and football. So we were playing with the masters all the time. Now this happened in Sherwood also, but Sherwood unfortunately had only 1 or 2 playing fields. Whereas in RIMC, there were so many playing fields. You had a separate playing field for football, separate hockey. Every class was playing and everybody was playing. As I said, our campus was very large and the number of cadets was very small. This meant that I certainly found that whereas in Sherwood I have to come first, second, or third in a class, because there were other boys who were very clever. But in RIMC, I found that it was generally always first in almost every subject. I took a special liking to physics and to mathematics. We didn't have chemistry. So I've done advanced mathematics, additional mathematics. I think in my senior chemistry exam, there are now three subjects of mathematics, which comprise of calculus, geometry, everything.
Right.
And also physics. Since our teachers are very good, and our physics teacher was particularly good. And if your teacher is good, you learn much more.
Yes.
Because you like the teacher.
Yes.
So physics I did very well. Now, because of that, there were many other boys who were a little dull. Most of them came from the northwest frontier province of India, which is now the northwest frontier of Pakistan. They're Pathan type, you see. So, for instance, in the first class I went to, which would be standard 5 maybe, equivalent, the age of 11.
Yeah.
And from Sherwood. Everybody in the class found that, and I had to sit in front because my eyes were a bit weak. It took time to understand that I had to wear specs. And my ears were not that good either. So I wanted to sit in front to hear what everybody was saying. Whereas most of the boys wanted to sit in the back row so that they could play games and things on the paper, or not listen to the teacher and do their own thing. So, like for instance, a mathematics master, the moment we entered the class, he had a huge Pathan called Nasirullah Khan Babbar. Now, we were all 11 years old, and I was a very puny, small, measly looking fellow. No hair on my face or armpit anyway. And here was a so-called 11-year-old with a huge hair under the arms, beard growing, everything. Said he's 11. I mean, in those days, there's no means of checking a person's age. Whatever your parents said was the age. So if you had to come in at 11, no matter you're 15 or 16, people said that you're 11 and you went in. Of course, there was a strict selection system, but nonetheless, got him. So he was made a fool of all the time. He's a hefty fellow. So he came to me and he said, Sharma, you will sit next to me. Yeah. Now, sir, since I was a small puny chap, I obey orders. It's okay. He says, whatever the master says in the mathematics class, he says 2 plus 2, Nasirullah, what is it? He gets flustered, poor chap. So I put the answer on a piece of paper, see that he answers the paper. So teacher got very impressed that Nasirullah Khan Babbar is becoming clever. So he said, if you're a small little chap, if anybody disturbs you, I'll bash him up. So, I mean, here again, like I found in Sherwood, that if you have a strong, good chap as your buddy, and you have got the brains, it's a good combination, right?
Yes.
So I got on very well with Nivedita, a very good friend of mine.
Oh.
There's a sequel to this, which I'll just jump to and come later in my talks with you. Much after my retirement, I would say about 9 years, so 7 years after my retirement, we were having a platinum jubilee in RIMC. And I got permission. I was retired for 7 years. In 1996, 1 year earlier, we decided to invite some of our old boys from Pakistan, getting on in years, to come and join us for Founders Day in March in RIMC. Took permission from the defense minister and from the foreign minister. Later went up to Prime Minister. They said, all right, as long as they're not serving officers and they're retired, we can invite them. So we invited them, and we went to Pakistan. So General Virender Singh was arranging it. So about 18 retired officers, from general down, major general down to captain of our IMC who retired, were selected to go along with their wives. There were 7 or 8 ladies. And General Virender Singh was not getting the visa in time. And we went to the Pakistan embassy 4 months earlier to get the visas to go to Pakistan, but the visas were not coming. When there was hardly a month left and no news of the visa, so General Virender Singh spoke to the Pakistani ambassador, who was very friendly. He said that, look here, what's wrong with our visa? So he says, you know, when you're retired military officers, the visa can only be given by the Minister of Interior in Pakistan.
Oh.
That is the Home Minister, right?
Yes.
Because you are military people, so the embassy is not permitted to give you the visa.
Oh.
So I have sent all the documents to the Minister of Interior, and he is not answered. So General Virender Singh started inquiring, who is this minister?
Oh.
Somebody said this minister is a retired Major General Nasirullah Khan Babar from the Pakistani Frontier Force.
Oh.
So he inquired about his email address. We got the email address and wrote to him, Nasirullah, we are all RIMColians, you're a bloody RIMColian, so why aren't we inviting you? Why aren't you giving us a visa? Nasirullah, whose Benazir Bhutto was the Prime Minister, Nasirullah was her Minister of Interior, as they call it. He said, if General and Mrs. Sharma are not on your list, I'm not allowing any Indian to come here. So the whole delegation came to my house and said, you have to come with us. So I had not planned. But after they insisted, you know, you can't disobey a whole lot of chaps standing outside your house. So it's all right. And my wife was very kind to agree to come. So I got sanctioned for myself to go there. They said, you're a private citizen, you can go anywhere you like. I said, okay, I'll come. The moment my name and my wife's name was sent to Nasirullah, the visas came through.
Oh.
The same man who at the age of 11 used to sit next to me because he couldn't answer the teacher's questions. And I have to tell him how to answer. See, we're such good friends.
Yes. How wonderful is this childhood story?
Yeah, no, this is our two countries. We are not going to keep fighting all our lives.
Yeah.
It's the same. People there are the same as you and me. There's no difference. In fact, I've visited many countries. I must inform you that the people in the military are exactly the same problems. Lack of space, separation from wife and family, postings in difficult areas, especially those who got borders, land borders. You know, America and Britain don't have land borders. They've got only sea all around them. But France and Germany and Russia, China, the African countries and us have got land borders. So the same problem. So when you scratch the surface, we're the same people. As they say in Sanskrit, Vasudevaya Kutumbakam. We are the same people. So it's the politics which makes the difference. So I spoke about religion As a young child, you're not bothered about it much, no matter what you're facing. For instance, in Sherwood, I always used to come first in the scripture classes. I studied the Bible, Old Testament, New Testament, backward, forwards.
Okay.
I said to myself, why do I like it so much?
Mm.
And I found that I like it because I'm very fond of music.
Ah.
Church music is beautiful. Very beautiful.
You also
The
must
organ.
be singing. Did you sing in the choir?
Sorry?
Did you also sing in the choir?
No, I didn't sing in the choir. My singing wasn't that good, but I was studying the piano
Oh,
up
okay.
to the third standard. But
Okay.
unfortunately, our master used to teach us the piano, also used to play the organ in the chapel
Okay.
in Sherwood.
Mm.
He had the horrible habit that if you made the slightest mistake, he used to take his pencil and beat you on your knuckles. You try it sometime. It's not an easy thing to bear.
I've got it in my lifetime.
Because even nasty with us at the age of, my father was abroad in Egypt.
Oh,
He was asked by the school that, does your son want to continue? You have to pay extra if you have to continue with music. That's the piano and the written music, of which I was very fond. In standard 4, if you're going up to senior school. So my father sent a letter to me, which arrived a few weeks later, to say, please say whether you want to continue with music. I said, no, never, because that just beats us up, you see. And that's one of the decisions. I'm sorry, I took a wrong decision. I should have continued with it, because I'm very fond of the piano. I'm very fond of classical music. And after I married my wife, she taught me about the Indian classical music, and so I'm very happy with that also. Music is beautiful. You know, out of our 4 Vedas, the Sama Veda is all music. That's the one that gives tunes and poetry to the philosophy. So all your bhajans and it's all based on classical music.
right.
And so they say that music is also a pathway to the Lord.
Yes, yes. And
Yeah.
that's what interested you in Bible studies.
That is the Christian religion.
Mm.
In Indian religion, it is not so structured. Yes, you go to the mandir, you sing the arti, you sing that, you enjoy that, and the kirtan is very enjoyable.
Right.
But there is no special teaching on it. See, you have to be interested. So the matter of religion, of course, I didn't have these views there. As you go on in life, these views mature about why you liked a particular religion or you didn't like it. But all the religions are saying the same thing. I've had a lot of associations with Islam, and I find it's a very fine religion. It's the politics of it which makes people violent. That's what I believe is correct and what you say is wrong. So in the military, there's always a rule that in the dining table or the officer's mess or whatever amongst the Jawans, there are 2 subjects that 3 subjects you never discuss.
Okay.
You never discuss politics, you never discuss religion, and you never discuss women. 3 things which have to be kept off the table. Otherwise, it's conflict. We're about to finish off.
Yes.
So we'll continue with RIMC next time.
Yes.
There are some other lessons that one learned
Yes.
there.
Yes.
And I told you about the training system there. It makes you physically very tough.
Right.
I found I was very good.
I'm unable to imagine you physically very tough, General.
No, toughness is not muscles.
Ah. Mm.
Toughness is the mind.
Mm.
You'll be very tough yourself.
Mm.
You don't have to be a huge person with bulging muscles. No.
Mm.
Determination and the mental determination is very important.
Mm. Mm.
But I was very good at gymnastics.
Ah.
I could do groundwork, somersaults, and climb up ropes and things better than everybody else.
Mm. Mm.
So I was a very good boxer. I was a very good hockey player, but I was small, really. So in boxing and wrestling, you match weights first.
Right.
If it is much heavier and bigger than you, then naturally you don't have much of a chance.
Mm.
But the factor here is that you have to learn to give it just a few tight blows, like I told you when I was in school in Sherwood.
Yes. Yes.
What is the toughness? That you have to be prepared to take a thrashing.
Right.
And so prepared to take a thrashing and the other chap is not. Then he lays off. He said, this chap is a jagda karne wala, you better lay off.
Yes.
That's how we
Yes.
have to deal with Xi Jinping and the Chinese.
Right.
So yeah, these are lessons there. And
All right.
yeah.
Then.
So now I was 5 years in RIMC from 1941 to 1945. And I found myself on top of the class as far as academics is concerned. I was physically very good as far as physical training is concerned. But now to go to the Indian Military Academy, you had to have a minimum age of 18. I was only 15 and a half when I did my senior Cambridge. And the senior Cambridge examination, I got a very good result. And I said to myself, what am I going to do here for 2.5 years? Because at 15. And so I went up to the principal, Mr. Scott, a very good man. I said, I want to do further studies. So he offered, he said, we can let you do a higher Cambridge course here in our RIMC. Some of the boys are doing. But I wasn't interested in higher Cambridge. Because higher, Cambridge system of exams, you must have knowing about them, are very good and very broad-minded.
Yes.
I felt that, in India, we need to have Indian board exams, in which they were. So I was more interested in doing the inter-science.
Okay.
Now the inter-science was available in UP board in my old school at Sherwood. I had already written to the principal in Sherwood, Mr. Reverend Binns. He knew me very well because I left at the age of 11, standard 5. So he said, certainly if you want to come back, we shall happily accept you. I had to get permission from my father, who was again abroad fighting the North African battles. So he gave his sanction. And with his letter, I went to my principal, Mr. Scott, to say that, Mr. Scott, my father has agreed. Now at RIMC, you get very good food. You have a separate mess and a contractor feeding you up very well. Because your hard physical exercise, you need to be fed well. Rations used to come like military rations. And so the government, it's a government school. The government is paying for your board, your lodging, and your education. Your parents only have to spend money for the odd extra stuff that you want, your toothpaste and your soaps and things like that, or your pocket money, and also sometimes to get a better uniform. You have to wear uniforms there. So, and also you go trips. RIMC has a lot of trips, adventure trips. So for that, we have to pay a little extra. So the parents don't spend much money. The result is that if you want to leave RIMC without joining the military, okay, you have to pay back to the government so many lakhs of rupees.
Right.
So I managed to request the principal to look at this subject carefully, kindly, because father being in the military was a lieutenant colonel commanding a field ambulance in North African campaign. I said, he's busy with the war. Mother has no income. And my elder brother's in the Indian Military Academy. He's got his commission. He's training for war. There's not much money in this house, in this family. So we may not be able to pay so many lakhs and all that sort of thing. So what about? He said, no, your elder brother has done very well in this school. He's one of our favorite cadets. Your father is serving the government and the military. He's doing very well. And you're a chip of the old block. We shall excuse you all parents. And in those days, principals were very, very important. See, principals, we don't think much of principals these days.
Yeah, it was a big decision that the principal could take.
In those days, if a principal said something, everybody accepted. So he said, I hereby excuse. He said that the government accepted that. So I paid nothing. In December 45, after my senior Cambridge exam, and by March next year, I arrived back in Sherwood College for a 1-year study to do intermediate science. Now, the Reverend Ben was the principal. He called me. He said, in RIMC, you had no chemistry.
Right.
But here for the inter-science examination is physics, chemistry, and mathematics, besides about 4 papers in English. That's English literature and all that, which I was not bothered about, I knew. So he said, since you've done no chemistry, you have to start from scratch. I had done some chemistry before I left Sherwood in Standard 5, very minor. But since RIMC did not have, I did not take the Cambridge examination for chemistry. So they said, you'll have to study chemistry. And according to the rules then, if you're a metric graduate, it took 2 years for you to do the inter-science exam, the first 2 years of bachelor's. You know, a 4-year course for bachelor's, Bachelor of Science.
Yes.
You did 2 years inter-science and then you did Bachelor of Science.
Right.
2 years university. So Sherwood was doing the inter-science. For a matriculation, it would be 2 years, but for a senior Cambridge pass, because the senior Cambridge examination was higher in, what shall I say, education than the Indian 10th class metric. So I was permitted to do it in 1 year.
Okay.
He said, are you going to do that? I said, yes, I will. So I studied chemistry in Sherwood from scratch, organic chemistry and inorganic chemistry, which you must be knowing all about it.
Yes.
And the main thing here was the laboratory and the practices in the laboratory, because I couldn't catch up to the class. Since they've done their senior Cambridge in chemistry, they were at a much higher grade than I was. I was starting from scratch. So we had a very good English chemistry master. And I went and called on him. And I said, could you be kind enough to allow me an hour, hour and a half after work, when everybody's gone home or playing their games and things, to work in the chemistry laboratory, could have one of the lab assistants or somebody present and have the gases functioning for the Bunsen burner and all that to do my experiment. He said, fine. So he was very cooperative. And the lab assistants, you know, somehow if you're a good student, everybody wants to help you. Everybody is nice to you. So since I was very keen and very sharp on this, and I was trying my best to work more than everybody else to catch up with the class, I got a lot of assistance. With the result, I managed to finish all my chemistry practicals, etc. And of course, as far as reading was concerned, I caught up with the thing very fast.
Right.
So I got a very high grade in inter-science in Sherwood. So that was in March 1947. I did the exam. And I got a very good result. I got a first division from the UP board. Now, in those days, the education of UP board was from the Allahabad University.
Right.
Which is one of the top universities of India.
Yes.
Madras University came up later. That was not considered so high. Calcutta University was not, neither Bombay. Allahabad University was considered the top in the country. Correct. So the board exam was considered a very high quality certificate, which I got. I noticed also that my interests were very military in earlier years in Sherwood and also in RIMC, looking at what's happening all over the world. Because my father was in the battles going on in North Africa, and when he came on leave or something, I had to ask him a lot of questions about what's going on there. But in Sherwood, I got somehow interested in aircraft. So I went to the library and I got a book, a nice thick book on aircraft engines. So I had to read this thick book. Now, what Reverend Binns was not a married man, he was a padri. He had a big house. He used to invite young boys and older boys to evening, half an hour, 1 hour to play around in his bungalow. He had a billiard table thing. He had a library of his own. He had a nice courtyard outside. The hill station is not easy to have a courtyard. He had a big courtyard where all the young boys used to go running around playing hide and seek and things like that. And so he found me mostly sitting in a corner reading this thick book on aircraft engines. So he told me, he said, look here, young Sharma, you are supposed to study chemistry, which you have not done, to be able to pass the inter-science exam. But I noticed you're reading this book. What is this? Show me this book. So it was aircraft engines. You know, the Bristol Aircraft Company in England had the radial engines, and I was studying the pistons and how they are made and what is the science behind it. So I said, I'm fascinated with this. I'm reading this. He said, then what do you want to be? I mean, why are you wasting your time studying this and not studying for exam? I said, don't worry about the exam, that I'll manage.
Yes.
This is something which is interesting. This and the second book that I was reading was aircraft fuselage design.
Okay.
Why does it fly? Why is the wing shaped in a particular way? What are the controls of the aircraft? You see, you know, the rudder, the ailerons on the wings, etc. Why is it when it's flying that it can bank and it can turn or it can go up or it can go down? So I studied all this. My father had a lot of these books in the house.
Okay.
At Times Life Productions, big volumes. They're now all rotted, unfortunately. Otherwise, there's tremendous wealth of knowledge there. How it works, how it's done, everything. So I was very interested in this, reading this. So he said, then if you get a good result in your inter-science examination, what would you like to do? I said, I'll be an aeronautical engineer.
Mm.
All right, if you want to be an aeronautical engineer, where do you want to study? I said, well, there are two places. One is I've written to Bristol Aircraft Company in England, and the other to de Havilland Aircraft Company in California, in US. They say that you first have to do an engineering degree before you join us as an apprentice.
Mm.
So Bristol Aircraft Company suggested that you do an engineering tripos.
Okay.
That's 3 subjects in engineering from Cambridge University. It's a 3-year course. And you don't go back to India for the Christmas vacation and other things. You come to our factories and we use you an apprentice as an apprentice in Bristol in England. And then after you finish your engineering tripos in Cambridge University, then you will require to spend 5 years with us.
Oh.
So we'll train you up, we'll give you a salary, but you will not go back to India. You see? Then after that, you'll get your practical and certificate for knowledge for having done engineering tripos on the one side and 5 years training in the Bristol Aircraft Company. Then you become an aeronautical engineer and you get the high salaries of an engineer. It's up to you then to stay with us or to find your future elsewhere.